I had to solve for why did some people say it's the leads,
Yes.
or the best leads ever, and others had the same leads and said it's the leads, they suck,
Yep.
And it's like it couldn't be. It had to be something else. It was the approach.
Yes.
Welcome to Beyond The IMO, where financial industry leaders will challenge your perspective and offer strategies to help you thrive in your independence. Here's your host, Justin Woodbury.
Hi, and welcome back to Beyond the IMO. Today, my guest is Jim Fisher. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Juicebox. They're an online appointment setting company that, in my opinion, is second to none. Jim is also a financial advisor in the industry. When I was the chief marketing officer for a previous IMO, I was contacted almost daily by companies claiming to provide online leads. And although those companies provided online leads in one way, shape, or form, nothing I was ever pitched came even close to what Jim and his company Juicebox does. In addition to so many things I respect about this company, by far my favorite thing is their money-back guarantee that comes with the training they provide on how to close online leads, which you'll hear in this interview is very different from closing in-person leads. I'm so grateful Jim said yes to this conversation, and I'm really excited for you to hear his perspective. So I know we've talked about this before, but I've heard your story a few times, but can you take me a little bit down memory lane, how Juicebox got started, your background, and all that?
Yeah. My story in sales and marketing started, accidentally on the sales side. In that I was hired for a role that I thought, was just to be, an educator, a product evangelist, and then by the way, there's a quota and a target. It worked out to be fine because the products that I was now responsible for selling were ones that I believed in emphatically, and I think that's where I realized that there's a profession, a noble pursuit in selling, and it really came down to being equipped with like the mindset that if there's no problem to solve, there's nothing to present, and that really kicked off my journey. I was, at the time, that company that I uncovered this belief was Apple, and over my tenure there, I ultimately became a corporate sales trainer, and trained over 500 retail sales people for Apple in the Apple stores.
Wow.
And along that time, I was a B2B business sales associate as well. So when I wasn't training, I was working with businesses, helping them buy 1,000 plus, iPhones or iPads at a time.
But nothing to do with what you're doing now, right? Just
Zero.
wow.
Zero. But I go back to that because of the, it was certainly formative in
Yes.
my ethos as it relates to the pursuit of being a sales professional.
Yes.
And I think in this industry that, that connects us now, being retirement planning, our success in how we serve advisors in the marketplace today are rooted in that foundation, and that belief that if there's no problem to solve, there's nothing to present.
Yes.
It's a cornerstone to how I coach advisors today. But of course, there's stuff in between there. When I left Apple, I knew that I couldn't, I kind of achieved my goals in life, oddly enough, working for that company. I knew I had to kind of find something that was more entrepreneurial. So I went into a more entrepreneurial sales role, moving to New York City. And it's at that time that I still had, my former clients at Apple and others reaching out for advice and strategy and guidance around all things digital as business was evolving. More and more did you have to have a strategy and a way to communicate, connect, and convert online. And so that's when Juicebox started, just as a consultancy. And over time, I realized I had to focus. I had to become everything to someone rather than something for everyone to, create a scalable value to serve more people, and to build a successful business, but ultimately rooted in creating a win-win.
Was that difficult to do, Jim, to become everything to someone instead of something to everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is. It's more of a mental hurdle, and it is as true. It's true in any business, and of course, the advisors that we serve today are faced with that same decision, and it's something that that I drive them towards, because there's just countless examples. The easiest one is that to prove the value in focus and specialization. Most people think that I'm going to narrow my solutions that I offer and therefore narrow my opportunity. But focus is magnifying your power and your value proposition. The simplest example is who gets paid more, the general physician or the surgeon, right? It's the one who developed themselves to have a very focused skill set to solve a very acute problem. Often surgery is very focused as well. It's a subset of that category as well. And I think the same is true, if you have your insurance license, you could be, just a life agent and when Medicare comes around, you do that, and then when that slows down, you switch to something else, and you're just all over the place because you've become addicted to the hamster wheel. You gotta keep it spinning. You haven't slowed down to specialize, and yes, in the beginning, focus is about what you say no to, and so. As I had to do in my business, I realized the power, and it's why we're successful today is because we've become very specialized in what we do at Juicebox, and it's that specialization that creates the necessary value for the people we serve. When you are just like kind of a general marketing company or lead vendor, and your business is much more transactional and hard to really dictate the outcome for your client, and I mean that in the most positive sense possible, which is to have so much experience and clarity in how results are created with the people you serve, that you can create a recipe for success that you can stand behind, and that means going beyond just generating a lead. Stepping back a sec. So I was in New York, did a bunch of different things, even had a successful bar. Was in the construction business and continued to grow Juicebox, and then ultimately got out of the bar business at its peak, and left New York. I didn't have to be there, and came here to Nashville, which is where I am now. Been here since 2018. And that's where that next level of specialization. I walked away from some corporate clients, Oracle, Ferrari, to name a few, and said, who can I find joint accountability with? Meaning, I'll take responsibility for my part, and I'll hold you accountable to yours.
Wow.
And through that, we went together. I mean, that's why I left working for the big corporate clients, because that doesn't exist. It's more CYA.
Yes.
Can I make myself look good? Do I feel good about the work? Does it make me feel good?
Yes.
And although, I say I want the outcome, nobody's really on the hook for it. So what I really want is to feel good and look good. And that's a vicious cycle that's unfulfilling and frustrating. And so coming here to Nashville, I go to networking meetings locally to to meet businesses and just to find that focus. And most of those rooms are filled with a few categories of people. Real estate agents, mortgage, insurance, finance are probably the most dominating categories in your average networking meeting. And so one thing led to another. They said, can you do marketing for me? And I said, just tell me about who your client is and how you serve them, what your value is to them, and I'll tell that story to attract them to you. And so it started with PNC agents from that networking, State Farm, Allstate, those guys. But I wasn't as valuable as I wanted to be, not because I couldn't, because just the economics of that market. The average sale is maybe $150, $200, and so you got to be it's very competitive from an advertising standpoint. And then you have an average sale, which a lower ticket often lends itself to lower skilled people, and so you have to be among the best among a low skilled cohort to get a low ticket sale.
Yes.
It's just a recipe that doesn't add up to above average results, or for your clients, meaning the majority get great results. Even if you set their expectations, say, hey, break even first year, compound the residual of an 85% book retention in the second, and everyone would say, yeah, that's great. We would even qualify, hey, you have to have at least a $3 million book value, because that's the only way you can really afford to cash roll.
Yes.
Year two and beyond. But you get a couple months in and they're like, I don't know, can we make this better? I was like, no, this is break even's the goal.
Wow.
You're hitting the goal. And so I was like, wow, it's my fault for realizing that no matter what people say in this market, it's never going to be, they're never satisfied, because the constraints of the market. And that wasn't the last time I ran into that. I told the PNC lead gen and sales stories, and then the life insurance agents, reached out from my social posting, and I went from PNC to final expense, and it was a similar challenge that I ran into that had me leaving that market ultimately, which is they're in contradiction with their own reality.
Okay.
They say I want better leads, and when you ask them, well, what does that mean? They say, well, I want somebody that has money and can actually buy things. And I was like, well, that's not who final expense is for. Somebody with assets and resources doesn't buy this end of life policy typically. It's not who it was designed for. And so really what you're saying is you want a better market, but you're unwilling to accept that and the skills required to level up to it. And so, along that journey, I was like, man, they're lying to themselves just like the other market was. They're not bad people. They just don't know any better. They know what they've been told.
Yes.
And so, but I'm contributing to this reality. And so from there, I went to another echelon of the market, which was the use of insurance products for retirement planning. It started in IUL, overfunded life insurance, properly structured for the purpose of tax-free wealth accumulation. And that's really where we hit our stride and made a name for ourselves. And then, we just had to solve more around that, which, today all we do is do marketing, generate exclusive opportunities, leads online, so you don't have to compete for attention. They're your leads. Nobody else's. And more importantly than what just a lead is, because leads don't convert themselves, skilled professionals do. We had to realize that that's a third of the equation, and the other 2/3 are a proven systematic way to sell virtual, because a lead who came through a digital process is expecting a digital interaction and sales experience. And so there's a lot of different nuances in how you sell in a virtual environment versus how you sell face-to-face. There's all these different things that exist in the face-to-face environment. I call them the tokens of trust, the things that orchestrate trust. They're often subconscious to even the agent, let alone the client, that majority of them don't exist in the virtual.
Yes.
Like, you don't have the physical building that they walked into, or the radio or the seminar that they saw you as the authority in the front of the room. All those went away. So how do you systematically generate trust when you're completely cold at that level of trust at the start? It's a different set of tools. And the ultimate thing that I had to do to be able to train people is get licensed myself. So got into the market, and for the first few years of PNC, final expense, and even early IUL, I was just taking my proven sales principles and coaching ability that I had from Apple, and helping create people with success. But I had to solve for, why did some people say it's the leads, or the best leads ever, and others had the same leads and said it's the leads, they suck, And it's like, it couldn't be. It had to be something else. It was the approach. And I had to go figure it out myself, and develop it to a deeper level. So I had the moral authority to transfer the specifics of being successful in a virtual sale. And that's what's got to this point. And now all we do is, marketing, and as important, sales coaching for, virtual retirement professionals using insurance products for retirement planning.
So I want to dig so much into what Juicebox is and why I'm such a huge promoter. There's so many reasons, but I want to dig a little bit further into what you said is these tokens of trusts that, let's just take the average advisor that is a listener on this podcast. They're used to doing in-person workshops, targeted direct mail, dinner seminars, maybe on the radio, maybe on TV, but they've built those tokens of trust, whether it's in person at a seminar or a workshop, or over the radio, over time, or TV. And you said something, I think one of the first times we ever met, Jim, is that advisors that are used to those types of interactions in first appointments, second appointments, they fail miserably a lot of times in a virtual environment. Can you expound on that a little bit? Because I really want the end listener here, including myself, now that I'm an advisor, I need to learn this, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So the things that exist, it's easy just to draw a comparison, is that when you are listening to on radio, they're building up this, what's called a parasocial relationship. They're building a relationship with you without you having a direct relationship with them. And that's elevating their trust. And also, so many people just don't consider the time that it took. How many episodes or how much airtime did they listen to before they reached out? There's a 3% of the market's kind of ready to buy now. And so those people might hear you once, are in market, and they call quickly. But the majority of people, another 37% of target opportunity is going to take time.
Yes.
And so people don't understand that as probably one of the biggest factors. And so there's so much trust that has been developed by the time you have a face-to-face meeting. And then they walk into a physical office, and there's a brand on the wall, and there was an assistant up front, and all these things signal trust to them, mostly unconscious. And what it allows you to do is there's so much invested before you ever met with them, such that by the time you do, you have all these foundations of trust that you can be way less systematic. So why a lot of people who have success in these traditional methods of marketing aren't really conscious to a specific way that they sell, right? They don't have the 7-step process that they run every time. And if somebody were to study it outside looking in, they would see many patterns and, replicated lines, sayings, sales motions, but most of the time they're unconscious to it, and they're usually way less systematic. They have that what any successful salesperson, especially face to face, knows. You have that belly to belly energy.
Yes.
That thing that you just it's kind of a dance and a bit of an unconscious performance that you've just ran through so many times, and you can do that dance with the individual because you've earned so much trust with them. All that goes away in a virtual environment. There's ways to orchestrate it. But you have to kind of become a student again. The biggest reason why people fail is because they're not willing to be that student and to say, I don't need to reinvent everything. You have so much credibility with yourself. I often say that there's 2 beliefs that drive success in any form of selling. It's certainly true in this process, such an important interaction for the client. Often their life savings we're working with. They've taken 30 years, and you're going to take 3 meetings maybe to gain their trust and take possession, or at least under advisement, under influence of these assets for their benefit. And so there's so many people that they're not willing to adapt, but back to the 2 beliefs that they do have, which can accelerate the process if they're willing to pick up a few new tools and develop some level of skill with them. And those beliefs are belief in the messenger, you as a value proposition yourself, like you are valuable enough to earn. We often say your expertise earns your business, and then belief in your message. What do you have to offer? So, and those 2 things kind of are self-reinforcing and cyclical. The more you understand your message and how to present yourself, the more you believe in yourself, and it's that conviction that converts, especially in a virtual sales process. It's not about getting them to believe. It's about them believing how much you do, and then being able to demonstrate it visually, with storytelling and data. Often, you're not having to do this. You can sell from a brochure and an illustration, face to face, because they're so close to the buying process with all the work that they did. Where in the virtual sales process, generating a lead online, you're more of the filter. More of the funnel is happening with you. And in the traditional environment, more happened before they ever got to you. And that's often why you see the expense structure to be quite dramatically different. What is it? You would know these numbers better than I, but what is it? What's a successful agent spend on running a seminar? $5,000, 10, 15?
Yep. So, between $10,000 and $15,000. Yeah. Radio, you can spend $50,000 to $100,000 a year. TV, $100,000 plus, depending on your market. But it's exponential.
Call it $4,000 a month, generating $5 million plus in premium. So if you look at the economic difference, it's just based on the numbers we were just running you, a third to maybe a tenth of these other traditional formats, which I'm not throwing stones at. It's a different model.
Yeah, right.
You can throw your own stones if it's still working for you. Yep. We have people come to us all the time, and I think it's why we have a pretty good reputation, is because we're not going to sell you that our way of doing it is the only way. It's a way, and if your way is no longer productive, provides a return necessary to make sense of and continue, then maybe consider a different one. But you can't pull the past into the future
Yes.
if the past is broken.
Yes.
For you,
Yeah.
I know plenty of people. You know them too that just absolutely crush on radio, but there's a limit to
Yep.
that. Especially like you could wait years for the airtime that you want, and you can only you can only reach them so many ways. So you need to diversify your channels as well. And so we had plenty of people who do hundreds of millions a year on radio, who then also do what we do and are successful because they accept that it's different.
Different, yes. I became the chief marketing officer of an IMO in 2020, right when COVID hit. Like I became CMO in, I think, February, and then COVID and the world was shut down. And so all of these advisors that were used to doing, because the IMO I worked for was heavy on in-person workshops. So in 2020, when the world shut down, everybody pivoted to Zoom. And there's a lot of, between 2020 happening, COVID happening, and me changing my LinkedIn profile to saying CMO, I started getting reached out daily almost from companies saying lead generation, online leads, we'll sell you these leads. And I'm sure you're familiar with all of them too, Jim, but I've sat on a lot of calls with a lot of lead generation type companies. Any time that an advisor that I was working with that was with the IMO complained about the leads, which they would always do. I think it's difficult to say I'm the problem. It's always easier to blame the marketing.
And they're not wrong.
Right.
There is some truth to it sometimes. But I mean, part of it is that the majority of the market, I'm sure you heard this before, but it's like they act as if they have the unicorn leads.
Yes.
The leads that are so good that, I mean, I see these ads all the time from, quote unquote competitors that you can just show up and close.
Yeah.
And it's like, you would never see anybody at my company say that.
Yep.
Now, listen, do we have agents that say, I've never worked anything like this? Sure. I'll let them say that, but I'm not going to let you believe that it makes all the difference. It makes some difference, but it's only a third of it.
Well, and these are unicorn leads that you can show up and close if you're if you're 1 out of 5, the first person to call them back and schedule an appointment and all that, which is funny that the overpromising also comes with under-delivering there. But my thing is I would talk to these companies on behalf of the advisor and say, hey, my advisor says that the leads suck. And they're like, no, your advisor sucks. And like you said, probably both is a little bit true, but talk about Juicebox and how it's so different from all of these other, when you said quote unquote competitors, I don't think you have competition because what you do is so different than any other.
Yeah, I guess we do is because, I say that for two reasons. Number one is it's easy for the advisor to just bucket us all together because anybody can say anything. So they can, and the other part of it is there are competitors who, going after the same client advisor, that literally just copy and paste our stuff.
Oh,
they
really?
copy and paste what we say in our marketing, and then they copy and paste the assets that we develop, for our clients.
Interesting.
And then they say, this is our service. And so, I mean, all I say is, it's frustrating, but must suck to have your business model be based on somebody else's coattails. Yeah. And then you also don't know the nuances and difference and all the testing. I mean, you stole the stuff that we beat, a year ago in testing. But anyway, so the key difference is that we really focus on developing. We have 3 levels of intent on the marketing side that we are developing so that the prospect actually intends to speak with a licensed professional about a specific aspect of their retirement. I say specific because we're marketing for a a branded solution to a clearly defined problem, like income or taxes or an inherited IRA or something like that. The very specific problems. So prospects come and that supports the sales process, right? And so, but that's just on the marketing side. So we take a lot of care in developing a high intent lead, but the best leads don't convert themselves. And so we're beyond that, where we further differentiate ourselves is because we are and have a community of producers that are actively using this marketing on this particular strategy that come together on a weekly basis. We have over $1 billion of career production on our coaching staff, a few advisors. One of them's got over 800 million, another's got close to 400. He's just under 400 million.
Wow.
And then we have guys that went from zero to about $10 million in a couple years. Completely virtual. And so we have people that are doing this. And the cool thing about it is that our biggest coaches, they don't just do this, they invest in it. They started as clients and to this day are still clients. Years later, 4 or 5 years. And I've only been in the insurance market exclusively for, it's almost 7 now.
Okay.
So, and I have clients that have been with us 5 going on 6 years. And so, but the key difference is that we're doing this. Now, some people think, well, if it's so good, why would you offer it to anybody? And I would say, why does Apple sell their phone outside of the Apple Store? It's because they can't reach everybody themselves, right? And they realize that it makes sense to find partners who align with their values, want to help distribute their product.
Yes.
Right? Our product is, we believe in doing it the right way, going beyond best interest, truly leaving people better than we found them, and realize that if we can't, we'll point them in a direction of someone or something that hopefully can. And so we find the people who are aligned in that way, and we partner with them and license our strategies to them, and not just give them the marketing piece of it, but then work with them on a weekly basis, both one-on-one, and then our 9+ coaching calls a week that are, sales specific, tool specific, tech specific. And, we have a call right now that we just launched an AI tool that's like a co-pilot to advisors that is actively helping advisors win $1 million plus cases.
Wow.
Because we're in the game, and we're not focused on like shiny objects. So many people in the marketplace with AI they're not saying this, but if you believe what they're saying, you are silently believing that AI is replacing you, right? They're saying it's going to do this part of your job and do that part of your job. And what we've realized is that the role of AI right now is for it to accelerate and expand your value proposition. We call it the invisible advantage. Is your client, especially the cohort of 55 plus, are the last likely to adopt it to the level that they would want to work exclusively with some chat.
Yes.
Annuities are sold, not bought. And you, not the AI, is going to sell them to someone in their best interest. But the gap that most people have in shifting to a virtual model is, how do I demonstrate and be more valuable and differentiate through that demonstration, that value, compared to the person that they can walk into the local bank or the Edward Jones or whatever. And man, can AI deliver a dramatic lift in that way, at least in the way we use it. And, so we have, internal tools that all of our clients get to give you the focused use case that is actively driving more business today. Not making calls for you, but helping you write every single email, handle objections, prepare for calls, role play, send relevant client information between every calls, build custom presentations for every client in minutes. We've delivered sales tools of slides and stuff, and they're still valuable to this day. But man, most advisors who are skilling up with AI are delivering a custom presentation every time to their client that nobody can compete with. And the goal isn't to get the client to understand, it's to make them feel understood. And what better way than presenting their scenario back to them in the most visually compelling and clear manner possible, so that they can feel confident in their decision to move forward.
So in a red sea of online lead companies that are constantly trying to compete with each other and provide online leads, but they'll either provide one lead to three or four or five advisors, or they'll provide whatever. And not to rip on those other companies, but Juicebox has created a system that matches one advisor with one lead for a specific reason that lead is, and the intent is to meet with them. And then on top of that, Juicebox does weekly training calls and trains you actually how to develop those tokens of trust that aren't present in a Zoom situation. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, it really breaks down into three, like that exclusive and qualified leads, qualified for that specific outcome. Pillar number two is a proven virtual sales system. And pillar number three would be accountability and support. Support being through the training, accountability in that until you're successful, we're meeting with you every 2 weeks, one-on-one, to check in, to do progress review, because what's measured can be managed, what's managed can be grown. And the reasons why we're able to drive such a consistent result for people is because we deploy and the entire CRM system that we can measure from cold lead to issue paid closed client, and that's what we're here to do, not to generate leads, but to help you issue business. And that's everything that drives our model to advisors is to help you issue more business.
And it goes back, I forget the way you said it, but to me, the way I would word it in my head is reciprocal accountability. So you guys are taking accountability for providing the quality leads and training, and then you're helping them take accountability by selling those
for
leads.
the right people, like who come to the table with experience, right? Depending on relationship, we're going to guarantee a minimum of 2 to 3x on your investment, as long as you do what we say, how we say, when we say it. You follow our process, follow our recipe, we'll stand behind it. And the reason we can do that is because we're engaged, and we do it ourselves. I have guys, and they used to physically be in my office here in Nashville, and they became successful and bought their dream home in Traverse City, Michigan, and now he's completely virtual from there. Nice. But I have guys on my team, and every time we create a new brand, a marketing strategy that has a brand behind it, we never offer it to an advisor externally as a client to participate in this campaign in an exclusive territory until we've issued over $1 million with it.
Wow.
And so that every time we do that. And so, one of the questions that I used to get asked before I was licensed, if you're so good at this, why don't you do it yourself? And I think it's a completely worthy question. And I would tell anybody who's out there looking for someone, you should ask them, are you doing this yourself? Do you guys use this? If so, why not? Because if it's so good at it, why don't you do it yourself? And we couldn't be as good as we are unless we were consistently. The fact that we have, like you said, we have guys that are $100 million plus year people using it. And then we have people who are doing what most people want to do, which is to add $5 million or more in virtual annuity production. Those are your coaches. If they're not on the coaching call, they're on a client call. And me, myself, I'm still on calls. I was on one last Friday.
Yeah. So,
because I'm always in there trying to figure out the next detail on newer campaigns, to, applying my sales experience and coaching ability to what are the little tweaks in the process that are going to increase the result for everyone.
So I've heard of online lead companies doing it themselves, but they also got a reputation of skimming off the top. So if an online lead was really, really good, they'd be like, we'll just keep that one and sell it ourselves.
So anybody who's selling on a per lead basis is systematically, would they kind of have the ability to do that. And so for us, if you became a client, Justin, we would set up a marketing funnel in your for your target geography. Right, you're in Colorado, right? Yes. So you would have a territory for that campaign in Colorado, and every single ad dollar that we manage goes through your funnel into your CRM. There is no collective place that we aggregate the leads and then therefore could filter them. And so just like structurally, you would get the lead, and we would have to go into your CRM.
Yeah.
And I guess when people have this like aggregate black box without transparency of what happens before you get the
Right.
lead, they would have the ability to do that, and through your ignorance and of how the system is set up, because you can't see it, they could certainly spin whatever story they want. But for us, like structurally, like when the lead hits your CRM, that's when it came into existence.
Yes.
Right. And so I think so. Just structurally, you get the lead when the system gets the lead, and the only people who have access to your CRM are like our technical super admins for troubleshooting and systems management. But our agents don't.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's for example, like if somebody's going to coach you, they have to talk to somebody in our support team to then ask you, hey, do you mind providing the call recording to Matthew, one of our like producing agents, but he's also like what we call like a co-selling agent. So he can come in kind of like Top Gun style and help you win the business. It's a case $1 million plus in assets. You haven't dealt with this before. Bring in somebody who has, and you can earn while you learn. And so if he wants access to any resources from your CRM, he has to go through the support system. He doesn't have access to it.
Got it.
So those are some of the reasons, but also at the end of the day, like, it's just wild that people do that. But here's the thing: when you do non-exclusive leads anyway, it's like, well, what's how deep can the rabbit hole go?
Exactly.
And so, but yeah, as long as you satisfy your contract, they're yours forever. And what I mean by that is, if you sign a 6-month agreement, and after 6 months you're like, hey, listen, this doesn't work for me. Okay, here, take them with you. They're yours. We're not going to do anything with them. We, because that's against our model.
Wow. That is powerful. And I already know the answer to this, but I want to stress too that you guys work with any advisor, with any IMO. They don't have to be exclusive to one or the other. It's just you guys are there for any advisor that wants to do online leads and be successful.
Sure. Yeah, and take responsibility for success. So like you said before, that reciprocal responsibility, I call it, or when I heard before, joint accountability.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
We're gonna get in the trenches with you. Because the only way we build a successful business is long-term relationships. If you're here for a month or two, we lost money in serving you. And so that's why we're so committed in the trenches, like, coaching and helping you evolve and adapt a new set of skills to get the result in this way of selling.
Yeah. So last question, Jim, you sent me a book, or gave me a book when I was in Nashville last year, whatever, called The Big Leap. And just in closing, I feel like when you're talking about people need to be confident in themselves, confidence in their value proposition, I almost interrupted and be like, yeah, that to me is right out of that Big Leap book. At least that's how it spoke to me. Can you tell just your experience? I love recommending books to advisors that like to read. So in closing, can you just talk about that book for a second and how it made an impact on you?
Yeah, there's 2 key principles that I'll always remember in that book, and it is the upper limit problem and your zone of genius. And often, I think when you're operating outside of your zone of genius, like what are you called to do? I mean, if you think about an advisor, most people is, and I'll give you one other book that advisors, because there's an overlapping principle, is called Buy Back Your Time, Dan Martell. If you're on Amazon, it's like a light blue, baby blue, white text, Buy Back Your Time.
Okay.
And I think, so there's an overlapping principle here. And, when you're hitting your upper limit problem, you're hitting the ceiling of growth. You're often operating, outside of your zone. And so like you were saying, your confidence would drop because you're operating in areas that you're not suited, you're not good at. And then so what do you do to get back to your zone? I believe that most people who are like, have a natural inclination to being successful in any sales profession, they should be really, their zone probably spans across, three things, which is developing relationships, developing solutions to their problems, and closing business, getting them to decide. And so anything that is before, between, or after that, you should get support on. Now, people make the mistake is they rather than delegating, they outsource responsibility, meaning they have they try to do this too soon to avoid the discomfort of like growing. And it's really hard to lead something you don't understand. You can't, that's not delegation, that's abdication. And so you have to go through it. But once you hit that upper limit, and as Dan Martell talks about, buy back your time, you hit the pain line. You're like, I can't do it anymore, right? Well, then you don't hire to grow your business. You hire to buy back your time. What are the areas that you could take that one hat off, and which give it to them? It's not your zone. Administrative would be an early component. That's one of the key things he's talking about, and you hand that hat off, and you help that person be successful, but you lead them based on outcomes. And so the more you stay in your zone, the less limits you will encounter. And so upper limit problem zone of genius. And then if you need to think about when do you hire, who do you hire, and what's the approach to being successful in the outcomes that person can deliver, the person you hire. Buy Back Your Time is another great book.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. And in both cases, Big Leap's more of a mindset book. Buy Back Your Time is literally a playbook for, making your first or next hire. And so I've implemented it years ago, like right when it came out. But the difference is, like I said, I didn't just read it. I applied it. And it's helpful that I have some team members. My COO, business partner, is more operationally minded, so he was great in executing it. But if he wasn't there, I would have gotten my hands even more dirty.
Yep.
But we're a team of about 50 people now, and so it's great to have those resources. But it won't be the last time that you there's always a new level of problems that we get to solve. The pain line will come again, and when you hit it, you'll know what to do. Don't hire to grow your business, hire to buy back your time.
Wow.
Because most of the time you're the one that grows it, but if you're stuck outside of your zone, you're going to stay stuck until you get back in it. So that's why you hire to buy back your time.
Love it, Jim. I'm going to drop your website and stuff in the podcast notes and stuff, but Juicebox, JUCEBOX.com is the best, your website, right? And the best phone number, 615-510-6499.
Yep.
And then hello@juiceboxny.com is your...
Yeah, either one will work. hello@juicebox.com. We started in New York, so originally it was JuiceBoxNY. The other domains, it's a little bit too pricey. Probably was more expensive when we ultimately bought it. But that's just the journey of business. And I think it's a reminder that don't get too hung up on the small things like what is your website day? We were doing 7 figures plus a year in revenue with a landing page.
Really?
And no active social media, meaning we had accounts, but we did nothing on it. And I tell that story to release you from the shiny object, BS that, you have to focus on what drives your business, which, like I said, is, it's meeting with clients. Now, here's the thing. Will somebody you're working virtual and somebody look you up? Well, we solve for that with our advisors. You don't have a website? Fine.
Yeah.
Whatever brand you're on, you could be on that website as a licensed advisor. So if you're working personalpensionaccounts.com, then you're on that website. Yeah. So I'm a licensed representative here. Before they ever ask you, send them your profile on that website. You're good. You don't have to worry about it. Do you want to have your own website at some point? Yeah. Most people just do that stuff out of sequence. Usually out of distraction rooted in fear. Or somebody selling them. Yeah. It's just usually out of sequence. And so I tell you that. As a marketing company, we were really good at what we were helping people do, which is paid, advertising. We had, like I said, social accounts and a website. But now if you go to our website today, it's hundreds of pages.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah.
We were doing millions a year before we had a website. Like, just not necessary because you're focused on the wrong thing. So, little tidbit at the end there, but that is our website. And if we can work with you, look us up on YouTube if you want to hear from clients.
Okay.
You go to Juicebox for YouTube, or you can look at Jim Fisher if you want more kind of education. Some of the stuff I put out. But I appreciate the time, Justin.
Yeah, Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And yeah, Juicebox, it's check it out, you guys.